Good morning and welcome to Liverpool Transfer Daily here on the Blood Red Channel. I'm Clarke and James Martin of Liverpool.com as we look to talk through the latest Liverpool rumours, and we'll cast an eye to what the rivals are getting up to as well. Get your comments and questions in the chat box. We will try to get to them through the course of the show. But James, Premier League Day, the Premier League starts again today. How happy are you to see it back?
Yeah, very, very pleased. It'll make our lives easier on Liverpool.com as well. Some more stuff to write about aside from just picking up on every scrap of transfer news we can find. Don't worry, we'll keep you updated with anything transfer related as well. But no, it'll be nice to get back to the main event of football. And yeah, pre-season's good. It's fun. We can learn a lot. You can see a lot of the young players who maybe you don't get a chance to watch. But yeah, something on the line now. The season proper getting underway. Very exciting.
Yeah, as I say, transfers seem to be the currency that send the content world spinning, but it is nice to actually have the football back to watch that, because that at the end of the day is what we all fell in love with in the first place. But we are going to get into transfer rumours, and let's start with Ismail Bennacer, the AC Milan midfield player who's been linked with Liverpool and a host of Premier League clubs. It seems as though, James, despite Liverpool perhaps wanting to wait till next summer, any central midfield player who there's a sniff of could be up for sale this summer is being linked with the Reds.
Yeah, and even those who there hasn't really been a sniff, they'll be up for sale. I think Milan would be loath to lose Bennacer. He had a very strong season for them, as of course when they went on to win the league title, which was a bit of an upset. Yeah, to be honest, he's one who'd gone a little bit under my radar until a few days ago when the links first started to, surface kind of a little bit less noisily than they have now, I suppose. But yeah, when he was first mentioned in the report, I had a look into his numbers, and I can see why the interest would be there. He does look like a very well-rounded midfielder. He's very much in that same kind of mould that Liverpool have been repeatedly linked with, that sort of player who can do that sort of all-action role in the middle, who offers a bit of everything. I suppose the counterpoint to that would be Liverpool would say they already have that kind of player in Keita. While he's around, is there a need for another one, especially when he'd come at a high price point? I would imagine, like I say, Milan are not going to want to let him go. So in terms of the actual logistics of the transfer, maybe I can't see it, but in terms of the player profile, I completely understand why that link's come about.
Yeah, 50 million euros is kind of the price tag that's been slapped on his head, according to reports. As you say, maybe one that is a bit unlikely, but is he the kind of profile as well that Liverpool need in that midfield? Because you say he's all action, he can also play kind of that deeper holding role as well. And beyond Fabinho, there's not really a specialist within the Liverpool squad for that role. Henderson's done very well when he's slotted in there, but whether it's a case of that then becomes his specialist role this season, I suppose it waits to or remains to be seen this season.
Yeah, another reason why we can be excited for the season to start. A lot of unanswered questions that we'll now be doing more than just blindly feeling around in the dark to answer. We'll see what Klopp's plans actually are. I think it does make sense to sort of gradually move Henderson back into that number 6 role as the kind of, specialist backup to Fabinho. I mean, in the number 8 role, you might argue some of the other options in the squad are really knocking on the door now in terms of pressuring that spot. Harvey Elliott could do so with a strong start to the season. Fabio Carvalho's come in. He's looked really, really good in pre-season. I don't think he'll be nicking the captain's spot straight away or anything like that. But there's players there now putting pressure on that right side at number 8 spot. And given like you say, there is a hole in terms of a secondary number 6, it does seem to just make quite a lot of sense to in the long term at least, sort of transition Henderson back into that role. The alternative, yeah, it is the transfer market. The question is, would you splash out sort of 50 million euros on someone who you view as a backup to Fabinho? I would imagine not, but that's where his kind of well-rounded side of the game comes in. You'd be getting a 6-8 hybrid, which I see the appeal of. It can cover multiple positions, and he could get game time even when Fabinho is playing. So it's a slightly easier transfer pitch than just come and sit on our bench, except for the odd time we rotate Fabinho. So yeah, it's the one sort of gap in the squad you say hasn't been addressed in the window. Whether you think it's worth addressing in the transfer market for a player who would, just be a kind of a sort of secondary fix for a rotation position, it's up for debate, because like we say, there's the Henderson solution. There's Bajcetic, who's looked exceptional on the pre-season tour. You mean you don't want to ask too much for him too soon, but it's another option. And then Klopp's been quick to say about his midfield options as well. He's happy with them, as well as Henderson. He name-checked Milner as someone who could slot in. Obviously, he's 36. He'll be 37 in January, so it's not ideal. But like, there are people who can play there. And given that Fabinho is undisputed first choice, you'd maybe say possibly not worth dipping into the market for those sums.
Yeah, no, we'll have to wait and see. Good morning to everyone who is joining us in the chat box today. Plenty of you getting involved, plenty of comments and questions flying in as well. And David Green, very, very excited for the start of the new season. Good morning, Klopp's Red Army, Red Army, Red Army. Yes, the Premier League season is back. Liverpool, of course, not in action until tomorrow. But the other player we're going to speak about, Griff, is Sane, Leroy Sane. Yes, that's right. The former Manchester City winger, now of Bayern Munich. Foreign media reports suggesting that Liverpool may be showing a bit of interest in him. What do we make of this one, James?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I did actually write a piece or two on him a few months back in the kind of the midst of the Salah contract dispute. I think it made a bit more sense back then in terms of if Liverpool and FSG were looking for a kind of medium-term Salah successor. And I mean, Sane, he does play on the left more than he plays on the right, but he's left-footed. He has played on the right. He could definitely do that sort of job. And, you know, he certainly terrorised Liverpool during his time in the Premier League. So that does tend to, those things do tend to stick in the minds of Klopp. It has happened more than once where a player's impressed against Liverpool and ultimately ends up at Liverpool. And yeah, it's the price being quoted is not wildly unreasonable. He hasn't necessarily had the best time in Bayern Munich. He's blown hot and cold. But yeah, I think the problem is the age profile no longer makes sense. Now we've tied down Salah for a couple of extra years. By the time we'd be looking to replace Salah, Sane would be, well, I think he's 26 now. So he'd be, you know, pushing on 28, 29 by the time the question resurfaces. And that's too old for an FSG signing most of the time. So unless they were to make a big exception, I'd be surprised. And if we were to buy him now, well, where does he fit in? There's not really a place for him currently. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, Mr. MH, Sane used to trouble Liverpool for City quite a bit. I think it'd be a good signing if it's feasible for the club to do so. And I suppose that is the big thing. I think for me this season, the strength of last season was the depth that Liverpool had, certainly in attacking areas, and with 5 substitutes this season across the competitions. I personally do maybe think there's a bit of a gap there in that forward line for a potential body to be brought in. And I suppose if you look beyond Luis Diaz for options on that left-hand side, whilst, yes, Diogo Jota can play out there, I would say he, alongside Darwin Núñez and Roberto Firmino, is very much preferred through the middle. So a player who could play wide and potentially James on both sides, surely it's got to be worth considering.
It's a fair point. I think Pep Lijnders said something interesting about the sort of Liverpool transfer philosophy in terms of, we sign prospects and then we sign game changers. And if they're neither of those things, then we leave the pathway for players already at the club. So when you look at players like Fabio Carvalho, who can play in the front line, Harvey Elliott can play in the front line, even Cade Gordon, obviously he's very young, he won't be playing major Premier League minutes or anything like that, but certainly in the cups, he's another rotation option. And I think maybe we were a little quick to write off Jota as a left winger. I mean, obviously he's been very impressive through the middle, and credit to him for making it seem like that's his first choice position now. But he was a winger when we signed him. He's looked very good on the left wing. I think it's the right wing where he's maybe been underwhelming. I think he's been almost equally impressive in the other 2 positions for Liverpool. That's just my take on it. Yeah, I mean, of course, if we're playing sort of fantasy football, then Sane's it's a fun addition, and an addition which would improve the squad. I don't think there's any doubt about it, but you've got to weigh up the benefit versus the cost. You know, whose pathways are you blocking? How much are you paying to do that? And how much gain do you get from it? The 5 subs point is interesting. You do want impact players from the bench. But I think when you have, at the very least, Firmino and Jota potentially in reserve on the bench, you have some pretty strong attacking options to change the game. So, yeah, it would be nice, but I think it's pretty much the definition of a luxury signing, and that's the sort of thing FSG don't do too many of.
Yeah, no, and it's understood that Leroy Sane, of course, when he went to Bayern from City, took incredible wages when he moved there as well. So he would be a player of a very elite and high reputable player who would command a very, very strong wage. And I suppose with the budget in which the way FSG do run the ship, a lot of people don't like it, but it is the reality that there is a budget that has to be stuck to, and it might be one that would be very difficult to do. Let's get to your comments and questions then. And Pon first up says, is the depth in the Liverpool squad enough to win the league and be competitive in other competitions this season? James, what do you think of that?
Yeah, cracking question. That's the $1 million question, really. A lot of pundits seem to think no is the answer. I've seen a lot of people saying that Liverpool have weakened themselves with Mane. They'll struggle to replace his output. And, fair enough, Mane's getting some respect on his name, which he absolutely warrants. He merits it. He was exceptional, particularly in the second half of last season. But I also think that the business Liverpool have done is being underplayed. Everyone is basically expecting Núñez alone to be the one that, to carry the kind of goal burden. But we mustn't forget Luis Diaz, who I view more as the like-for-like Mane replacement, really. You have to remember Mane wasn't a number 9 until very, very late in the day in his Liverpool career. He spent the vast majority of the time out on that left wing, which Luis Diaz has now taken over and looks very, very effective in doing so. So then you have got Núñez as well. I keep mentioning the youngsters. I think they're being underplayed. Everyone's looking at Carvalho and going, okay, he's maybe a good one for the distant future. But, I think some people could be surprised. I think he may have a part to play this season. Elliott as well. The injury means he's gone so far under the radar. I think there is depth there. I don't think it's significantly worse than Man City's depth. So, yeah, I don't see why Liverpool can't go again on multiple fronts.
Yeah, Alan says surely the squad is big enough already, so we will have to wait and see. Game of opinions. Mohammed's got in touch. He says, I think Fab needs a backup this season. And on that point, Kumar has got in touch, one of the regulars on the morning stream, Liverpool Transfer Daily here on Blood Red, says, why aren't we considering Ibrahim Sangare from PSV Eindhoven as Fabinho's cover? He's pretty good centrally and has good distribution. I know there's been plenty written about him across on Liverpool.com, James, and he is a player who does really stand up well in the data, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. It would make a lot of sense on paper. I agree with the previous comment as well. If you're looking to pick holes in the squad, that is the one big one, the Fabinho cover. I think, however Klopp spins it in terms of his current midfield options, it is the one risk that we're taking going into the season, really. We're an injury away from what is, however way you spin it, quite a makeshift solution. Because, even among the names we've mentioned, we've got, a number 8. We've got a 36-year-old James Milner who, started his career as a winger. So he's been moving all over the shop. And then we've got a 17-year-old in Bajcetic, who, again, isn't actually a specialist number 6. He's played centre-back. He's played all over the shop, really. So, yeah, it's not ideal. But then it wasn't ideal last season, and we still pushed for the quadruple. So I think we can get away with it. It's just, someone like a Sangare would really top off the window, make it a 10 out of 10, but maybe an 8 or a 9 without him.
Yeah, you say that would make it a 10 out of 10. Well, Tom here wants to make it a 20 out of 10, I think. Barella now, Bellingham next summer. Well, that would be some doing for the Reds. And Kumar does say as well, how excited are you for the game tomorrow? It's going to be a cracker of a start. And on that, David's predicting Fabio Carvalho to be for the here and now this season and make himself a permanent fixture in the team this year. And of course, Liverpool start away at Fulham, his old hunting ground. I have to say, James, as much as looking forward to the season, I'm really looking forward to what Fabio Carvalho might provide this season.
Yeah, definitely. That's a big call. I respect it, David, putting your neck on the line there. But yeah, I don't know whether he'll feature at Fulham. Maybe he'll make it off the bench. Old club, it might be the sort of thing that Klopp looks to do, especially if we're in a comfortable position, which you'd hope might be the case. Fulham have not got off to the ideal preparations for the season. They're very light, particularly in defence, which doesn't necessarily bode well for facing a pretty deadly Liverpool team. So yeah, maybe get a few goals up and we'll see our first glimpse of Carvalho. And yeah, that could be the start of him looking to nail down a place long term. I don't think I'd necessarily be so emphatic because there's a lot of competition in there, but I rate him really, really highly, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that come to pass.
Yeah, no, definitely. Before we go, Remy asking about Marco Leonardo. He says from Flamengo. He's a Santos player, I believe. We've spoken about him a number of times on the Transfer Daily Show. It's certainly one we've got an eye on, and if there is any movement and development on that, we will discuss it first here on the Liverpool Transfer Daily on the Blood Red Channel. Plenty to come across the Blood Red Channel today, including Jurgen Klopp's press conference. We'll bring you Marco Silva as well as the Blood Red podcast. Looking forward to the start of the new Premier League season, and plenty indeed to come across on Liverpool.com too. But from myself, Guy Clarke, and James Martin, chat box, you've been brilliant. Thanks for getting involved once again this morning. Until next time, it's bye for now.